Well, this is Imperfect Action, and I'm Brock Edwards, and today's guest is Chip Conley. Chip, can you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are and what you're about.
Sure. So I'm a a hospitality disruptor. I guess I've disrupted my favorite industry, hospitality, twice. First as a boutique hotelier in the mid 1980s, and then 6 years ago, more than 6 years ago, joining the three millennial founders of Airbnb and in the home sharing space of the hospitality business. And then most recently, I've created the world's first midlife wisdom school called the Modern Elder Academy.
Awesome. A lot of people talk about disrupting industries. Uh, Fewer people have actually done it, and so you've been able to do it a couple of times. And I really want to dig into the your Modern Elder Academy. But before we get there, I'd love to find out, for you, why disrupt? How disrupt? What made the difference?
Well, I don't. Yeah, I don't think people disrupt, especially in the hospitality business, for the sake of disruption. Because frankly, hospitality is a the nature of the industry is to be, very, uh, very. We're serving people. We're making people feel good. So disruption sounds like it's something you do in a different industry. But I think that my experience is that as a customer, and then also as someone on the outside, I think a lot of times we can see the missing spots or the blind spot that the industry has. Back in the mid 1980s, as a 26-year-old, 25-year-old, I could see that the hotel industry was completely obsessed with predictability, and the big hotel chains didn't understand that there was a growing segment of the consumer base and travelers who were really interested in an experience, a very localized experience, something that had a design flavor to it. And that's where boutique hotels came to be. And then similarly, when I was in the establishment, I did not see home sharing coming along. But the three founders of Airbnb didn't create home sharing to be disruptive. They just knew that they were having a hard time paying the rent in San Francisco, and they opened up their living room with three air mattresses so that people who were coming to a design conference could stay there and they could make a little bit of money to pay for the rent. And that got them to thinking, well, is there something bigger than just air mattresses on a living room floor? So I think disruption is. I also think disruption as a word is a relatively recent word because it really describes how technology scales things. As a boutique hotelier, I really wasn't a disruptor. I was an innovator. I think the difference between innovation and disruption is technology. And Airbnb was a disruptor because it could be a global presence found online overnight. Whereas my boutique hotel company, while it did grow to be the second largest in the U.S. boutique hotel company, it, it couldn't grow with the kind of scale that Airbnb could.
Now, with the Airbnb guys, now you mentioned that they were essentially solving a problem that they had,
Yes.
and no cost, no risk. Putting out on Craigslist or whatever was available at the time, and rent out a couple air mattresses, basically. But for you, 25, 26 years old, there's a huge difference there between just saying, yeah, hotels could be different, and actually doing it. I mean, what motivated you? What inspired you to make that huge leap there?
I was a real estate developer, but albeit a relatively young one. I was focusing on commercial real estate development, but not hotels. But I had enough background in the commercial real estate development business that I thought I could apply that to a segment of that business, which is the hospitality or hotel business. Um, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur when I was a kid, and I sort of saw my opportunity then. Now, that's one thing, but then there's the process of like, how do you get a hotel? How do you buy a hotel? How do you get the money together? And so all of that was not easy. But I did raise money, about $1.1 million, which is not a lot of money to buy a hotel, but raised $1.1 million from people I went to college and graduate school with to buy a broken down motel that was a pay by the hour kind of place in San Francisco's Tenderloin, which is a pretty tough neighborhood. And that's how I got started.
So that's really actually fascinating to me. The idea that, okay, I'm gonna make this leap. I'm going to go into a field that I don't, it's not your prime field. It's an extension, something new. Don't have a lot of money, although 1.1 million was certainly a lot more money in the mid 80s than it is now. But and then you pick a location that I think most people would go, yeah, that's not really the place for a boutique hotel. And so, a leap of faith. What was it there that made you go, yeah, this is the place. This is the start.
I think the thing about the particular property that spoke to me, even though it was a terrible location and it was in bankruptcy and it had a very seedy customer base in it as a pay by the hour kind of place, is I walked into the courtyard where there was a swimming pool and a landscaped courtyard and there was a restaurant that sort of faced out on it. It was a very classic 1950s place, and I immediately looked at it and said, "What a great place to throw a party." And that is true. I just sort of said, "This is a great place to throw a party," and I didn't really, and I knew a lot at age 25 or 26 at that point about how to throw a party and maybe even how to make money throwing a party, which I'd done before. So I used that as the basis to say, yeah, I think you could create a hotel company out of this, 1 acre motel in the middle of the city where it looked like it would be a great place to throw a pool party. So fortunately, I had enough business experience and I kept the initial business small enough. So it gave me 3.5 years to really learn the business before I expanded to my second hotel.
Okay, so the second hotel, you went with different themes with each hotel,
Yes,
correct?
each one had its own name and concept.
How I'm stumbling over a question here, Chip, and that is, it's easy once you do something and you're successful at it to just go replicate it, but that's that consistency that you were trying to avoid, and so that sounds kind of risky. Like, hey, I'm doing good at this, and let me just go do something that's a little bit different. What was the connective tissue for you there, where you said, even though it's different, it's the same enough, I can do it?
Well, the thing that I had going for me is I really saw this as a almost like an art form. The process of creating a hotel, to me, the name, the kind of restaurant, the concept, it all sort of felt like I was, each time we were doing it, I was directing a group and we were creating a collective art form that was a boutique hotel. And over the course of 24 years as the founder and CEO of that company, Joie de Vivre, I helped create 52 boutique hotels. So the way we created them, quite simply, was there was a process, and it was a process we used over and over again, and it worked really well. Each time we were creating a hotel, we imagined a magazine or sometimes a hybrid of two magazines that defined the personality of the hotel. So if that first hotel, the funky hotel in the tough neighborhood, the market we were going to go after, we thought, was musicians, artists, creative types. And so the magazine that defined the personality of the hotel we were going to create was Rolling Stone. We came up with 5 adjectives that defined Rolling Stone: funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart. And everything we did in creating that hotel, from the style of the rooms to the kind of restaurant we created to the kind of staff we hired or the services we offered, all had to come back to those 5 adjectives, or a combination of some subgrouping of them. And so each time we created a hotel, it was a different magazine, a different personality. But the magic in all this was not that it allowed us to create a different soulful hotel each time, which was true. But the thing that really made it magical was the people who fell in love with the hotel we found were people who didn't fit a demographic, they fit a psychographic. There was a psychographic is like what we feel like on the inside. A demographic is what we look like on the outside. Well, the people who fell in love with that first hotel, the Phoenix, which was based upon Rolling Stone magazine, and the 5 adjectives were funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart. Those people who loved that hotel were people who actually thought those 5 adjectives described them on a good day. So what we found is we were in the business of not being a boutique hotelier, but we were in the business of creating an identity refreshment.
So with each hotel having a different identity, did you get customers? Did your customers go just to a specific hotel, or did they go to the chain? Even though, well, not the chain,
Mm-hmm.
but different ones, even though it was a totally different experience.
They went. So the thing that was nice is over time, uh, people said, "Well, that's weird. This is a boutique hotel chain, but each hotel is different. So that's not a great idea because you're going to fall in love with one hotel, but not all of them." But the thing is that we, as personalities, we have different personalities for different times of our lives and for different purposes. And so, if you're going on a bachelor party, you may have 5 adjectives that are different than if you're going on a business trip. So, what we found is that people fell in love with the concept of the identity refreshment, and they would try out multiple hotels. But they would also realize that not every one of our hotels was going to be right for them.
What is it about the way you do business or the way you lead that is different from the way others lead?
I think that one of the things I've really believed in is the idea of culture. How do you create a culture where people feel like they're bought in and completely connected, and maybe that their voice matters, and that they're having an impact? And everybody says that, but the question of how do you actually do it is not so simple. And part of the reason I've written 5 books is because my process of learning about this has led me to wanting to write about it, which forces me to be more of an expert about it, which allows me to hopefully be a better executor or leader using those principles. And so I think one of the things that's different about me is that I really appreciate having a team of people and building an organization that is not based upon the CEO as the sort of lone leader, the rugged individualist, but it's really based upon building a team of people who actually feel very invested in what the organization's about and have a voice. So it does mean that there's a little more democratic decision making, which can slow the processes down a little bit. But in the long run, I think it creates a more loyal and diverse organization.
What did you do to get that to the outer reaches of your organization? With your team, with those around you, with the hotel that you're in that day, that seems easier, but you're not in every property. So how did you get the culture where it's stuck, many levels down below the CEO?
We studied Southwest Airlines relatively early in our company's history, and we're really intrigued by how Southwest was able to create a low cost airline that had some of the highest guest satisfaction and had absolutely the highest employee satisfaction. And so, in studying them, it helped us to create a whole set of systems that, in essence, democratized culture, such that the culture was not just run by the CEO or by the HR department. It was something that everybody in the company felt like they had some influence over. And that process of of democratizing culture meant that as we were growing, more and more people in the company were invested in that culture, which allowed us to grow further. And so there were while the culture was quite different from one hotel to the next on some level, because the hotels were quite different personalities, there was an umbrella culture that sort of defined the company, which spoke a lot to our name. Our name, Joie de Vivre, means joy of life. And so our mission was also the name of the company.
If someone hadn't read your books, where would you suggest they start? Is there one that just is strongest in your
I've
heart?
written 5 books, which is such a weird thing for an actually operator slash CEO slash someone who's embedded in companies. I like to write early in the morning. I would say the 2 books that are most representative of my point of view would be Peak, which was my 3rd book, called Peak: How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow, as in Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the psychology theory. Um, that's a really great book in terms of understanding an organizational philosophy and point of view that can define how leaders focus on the hierarchy of needs of their employees, their customers, and even their investors. And then my most recent book, which came out last September, is called Wisdom at Work: The Making of a Modern Elder. And that tells my Airbnb story, having joined the company at age 52, twice the age of the average employee, never having been in a tech company before, and being the mentor to Brian, the CEO, who in fact I'm having dinner with tonight, and who ultimately became as much my intern. I became his intern as much as his mentor, because he taught me a lot of things around DQ, digital intelligence, and I taught him a few things around EQ, emotional intelligence. And it was basically a mutual mentorship relationship. And I think the future of business is all going to be about intergenerational collaboration. So, yeah, so I think for people who want to understand the future of business, that's a great book.
Well, Chip, I love the phrase modern elder. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yeah. So the first of all, let's just recognize that. Excuse my scratchy throat. Let's recognize that um, many of us, in fact, most of us, may live 10 years longer than our parents. And yet, in a digital society, as we've especially seen in the last 10 years, 10 to 15 years, power is moving 10 years younger. And there's a bunch of metrics that I outline in my book that show that. So the phenomena of what's happening in the tech world, which is power moving to younger people faster and faster, is actually now sort of spreading to all kinds of other industries. So if we're going to live 10 years longer and power is moving 10 years younger, we've created a 20-year irrelevancy gap that didn't used to exist. And so, what I was started to wonder about while I was at Airbnb, whereas I was lucky because the CEO and his co-founders really wanted me here at Airbnb, what I was seeing was a lot of my friends who were in their mid 50s were feeling more and more of ageism and a hard time getting a job, not just in the tech industry, but in all industries. And so that brought me to the question of like, well, what is it that we have to offer? And I think the traditional elder of the past was sort of the person who dispensed wisdom. But because in the past, change didn't happen all that quickly, especially in agrarian society. So, like, you understand how land works based upon the seasons. And the longer you've been a farmer, it's probably the better farmer you are. Well, when it came to the industrial era, or especially the technological era, that was no longer true. Your age and experience actually worked against you, maybe. And so what I started to imagine is that the traditional elder of the past was regarded with reverence. But the modern elder is as curious as they are wise, so they're appreciated for their relevance, not their reverence. And the relevance requires that you are as curious about what's happening in the world so you can understand the context in which to offer your wisdom. So curiosity opens up the possibility, and wisdom distills possibility into maybe distilling it down to what's most important. And it's that combination of curiosity and wisdom that I think defines this modern elder. And in a world where power is moving to digital young leaders faster than ever before, many of these young leaders, frankly, don't have the relationship wisdom or experience to be managing companies that are growing as fast as they are. So, trying to match modern elders with young, brilliant leaders is, to me, I think, part of the future.
Essentially, what does the modern elder have to offer? Because as you were mentioning, agrarian society, you have a lifetime of experience, but in the modern age, things are changing so fast that some of that experience may not be relevant. So I guess what is the core of experience that the modern elder can bring if it's not, how to do technology better?
Well, let me use my example. And I think I've seen so many people who have a comparable to this, but I can tell you my story better than I can tell you someone else's. I was brought into Airbnb because this was a small tech company with a design focus, but didn't have anybody in the company with a travel industry or hotel or hospitality background. So there was the thought that, okay, Chip understands hospitality. We'll just apply that knowledge, those facts that he knows, over to us at Airbnb. Well, the truth is that my fact knowledge at Airbnb wasn't all that valuable because knowing how many rooms a maid can clean in an 8-hour shift didn't matter much for a home sharing company. So sometimes that doesn't help. But what I really did understand was three other things. Number one is I understood the industry and how it was organized. And there were all kinds of things like, like um, acronyms or lingo like RevPAR, revenue per available room. So there were things that I could translate for this young tech company that related to the industry they were going in. And I see this a lot, for example, in healthcare, where experienced longtime healthcare professionals are really helpful to young startups that want to figure out how to disrupt, what's a pretty broken healthcare system. And so that know-how of how the industry works can be very helpful. And then the know-who of understanding who's in the industry and sometimes being a superb networker was very helpful at Airbnb because, quite frankly, we had the hotel industry initially ignored us, and then they ridiculed us, and then they fought us. And so part of my role at times was to help build a bridge and to help try to figure out some strategic partnerships that would work, not just with hoteliers, but also with destination marketing organizations that market a city or a convention center, or travel agents and the like. So that know-how and know-who were important. But I think the biggest thing that a modern elder can really offer is, while our IQ can't grow as we age, our EQ does. And one of the things that happens is, and especially in a young tech company, is everybody thinks it's just a tech company. Well, no, it's actually a human company. It's we're in the human business because we're full of teams of humans. And the process of understanding emotional intelligence and understanding how to be a how a leader of a collection of humans, and how to collaborate and how to understand motivation and inspiration of employees was particularly valuable in a company like ours at Airbnb because the company is full of teams. And so I was able to be very helpful to Brian on that. And I think that that's very true of generally of older workers.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere business, is done for, by, and through people, and I don't think we can avoid that. And so I love that connection there of how we do it better. There's an old expression that it goes, if only youth knew, if only age could. On your website, you seem to have kind of turned that expression on its side, and I love it. The quote you have posted: "It's young enough to take up surfing, old enough to know what's important in
Mm-hmm.
life." Can you say more to
Say
that
say
quote?
your quote again. I'm writing it down.
Yeah, yeah, it's an old expression. I don't know where it's from, but it's if only youth knew, if only age
Hmm.
could.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting is that we are living longer and we're actually healthier longer. Now, this is not true of everybody, but in terms of Western societies, there's a lot of evidence of this. And so, you know, a generation or two ago, if you were 55 years old, you were in the process, especially if you were a manual laborer and you're in the industrial part of our economy, you sort of burn yourself out by doing redundant work and also doing work that actually has a physical toll on you. That, as well as cigarettes and alcohol and a few other things that we frankly didn't know were as bad for you as they were, meant that a person who's 55 years old might only have another 10 years of their life. And frankly, at 55, they might be not going out to a gym because, frankly, a generation or two ago, gyms were not as prevalent. And they, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the fact is, I'm 58 years old and I'm just learned surfing. Most people don't learn surfing at that age, but we're going to see more and more people taking up new things at an older age. And so that means that the person who in the past might have physically been unable or maybe mentally was unprepared or frankly didn't imagine that they had much life left so they wouldn't actually try something new, that's shifting. And online longevity sites say that I'm going to live till maybe age 98. If that's true, then age 58, I'm actually only halfway through my adult life if I start counting at age 18. So that kind of thinking, that kind of new math helps those of us who are in midlife and beyond to actually take up Spanish, as I have recently done. Because you know what? If I take it up now, I'm going to have decades ahead of me where I could use it. Whereas if I thought I was going to live and only till age 65, I probably wouldn't take that up.
Yeah, it's wild to think, 4 decades to go. As you mentioned, it's not that long ago that 58 would have been let's think
Mm.
about retirement time. So tell me about this Modern Elder Academy. What are you trying to do with that? Or what are you doing with that?
Well, so in the process of writing the book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, I came across many, many interviews I did with people in midlife, hearing a lot of anxiety and bewilderment by that irrelevancy gap I mentioned earlier. I'm going to live longer, but I feel irrelevant younger. So I feel this doesn't make me feel good. Longevity is a great thing, having a longer life, but if you can't afford it because you can't keep a job or you can't build retirement savings, that's a problem. So what it made me start to think about is the fact that as societies we have a tendency to create almost rituals and rites of passage and celebrations when people tend to be going through transitions. We do this at puberty, we do this at adolescence to adulthood, we do it when someone's going to commit themselves to each other and have a wedding, when you're going to have a baby, when you die. All of those have some rituals and celebrations that are well known. But because midlife is a relatively new phenomena in the history of humankind, we haven't really created that. And so I decided to create this thing, the Modern Elder Academy, where people could come and reimagine their life, repurpose themselves, shift their mindset about what aging means, and what they have to offer to the world. And we tried it on a beta test basis for 6 months. It went really well. And then we opened last fall to the public on a 3-acre campus on a beachfront in Mexico, an hour north of Cabo San Lucas, which is southern Baja. And it's a week-long program. It's a social enterprise, so 60% of the people who are coming are asked for either a full or a half scholarship. Average age is 52. We've had people as young as 30 and as old as 78. And the premise is that people are in midlife is a lot broader than I thought it was. I thought it was 45 to 65, but it turns out it's actually more broad than that. And people feel like they're going through transitions earlier and later in life, and they're looking for a place where they can learn how to effectively go through a transition, whether that's a divorce or changing a job or empty nest syndrome or anything like that.
Where can people find out more?
Well, my website for chipconley.com is where you can find out more about me and my book. You can find out more about the Modern Elder Academy at modernelderacademy.org, but it's also attached to the Chip Conley website.
I think we could go on talking a really long time, Chip, and I know we have some time constraints here. So my last question for you, and this has been amazing, thank you, is how can people help you? How can the listeners help you? What would your ask be of them?
I think what I'd love to have people do is to reimagine, that aging actually can bring some unexpected pleasures. And the U curve of happiness has shown us that people actually get happier in their 50s, 60s, and 70s than the prior decade. And the societal narrative doesn't suggest that. So I think we need to help get our personal narratives out there in the world a little bit more. Love people to buy my book, which speaks about this a little bit more, Wisdom at Work, or explore our Modern Elder Academy, which, frankly, since it has scholarships programs, is available for just about anybody.